What's up, y'all, and welcome back to the Michael Experience Podcast. I am your orator and originator, Michael, and these are my thoughts, my life, my way. We are continuing this journey of life lessons or hard life lessons, as I like to say, because I think it's important that we really take stock of things as we learn and as we grow and change and win and lose and all those things. But as I'm sitting here, it's about 8 a.m and I'm in my house at my island, and I've got my green tea, and the sun is just now shining in the window. And I come across this video of Tariq Ali. And for those that don't know him, he was a popular YouTuber and social media influencer for quite a bit. But I watched one of his latest videos about how he intentionally hit rock bottom and just what that really did for him in terms of a reset. And it started me to thinking about my own life because there were definitely some parallels to what he was talking about. And, some of the points were having the life that everyone wanted to have and the life that people wanted to be a part of because of what he was doing. And that encompassed and included friends and family and, acquaintances and all these things. But having the things and having the optics of and the people wanting what you have, but still feeling lonely at the end of the day. And that has been one of my hardest life lessons up until this point. So I've always been one of those people that just is doing. I'm always doing. I'm always trying to get to that next level. I want to make more money. I want to be more comfortable in life. And I think initially it was about getting away from poverty for me. It really was. I grew up with my two siblings. We had one of those shotgun houses that you could see, front door to back door pretty much. Um, and resources were just very thin. And I grew up in a neighborhood where people would say that if you didn't work in manufacturing, that, or if you didn't work in a hospital, that you weren't going to really do much because of the rural area that we lived in. And so expectations and dreams were not supposed to be like sky high or out of this world. It just was supposed to be those things were the barometer for success, and that's where you had to go. So all of these other things that are now present in my life were just really what some, I guess, would consider an anomaly in my area, because people weren't thinking about that. They were thinking about just making it. But I was like, I gotta get out of here. Like, I gotta get out of here, because if I stay here, then I will surely die. Now, I know that sounds jarring, and I didn't mean it in a way as in I wasn't going to feel safe physically. And I mean, sure, that may have, years later become an issue. I don't know. But I just felt like inside the character that I have, the big persona, the big personality, and all of this that I have to give to the world, I was just like, I am just going to die a slow death if I stay here, because there's nobody here nurturing my creativity. There's nobody here really telling me that if I wanted to go to Hollywood, I could go to Hollywood. There's nobody telling me if I wanted to fly planes, I could fly planes. I mean, although that wasn't my aspiration, there was nobody telling me that I could do anything I wanted to do, which is, I think, one of the cornerstones of people kind of pushing their kids out in the world and selling them the dream, the American or whatever dream, the dream of success wherever you are. And so For me, like I said, it was really about I just want to get away from poverty and I want to get away from this stricken mindset because I will never grow. I will never grow mentally. I will never grow intellectually if I stay here. And so that was my fuel and my motivation early on. Now, as I opened myself up to the world and began expanding just every part of me, places I would go, people I would meet and interact with, different neighborhoods, and just seeing things for what they are. And I made a conscious decision to never really like prejudge something before I got to know it myself, right? Like I knew like there were certain areas that were certain places that I went. I knew there were certain areas that they were like, yeah, those are unsafe. And of course, I would always, have that lens, but I always kept really close to me that I just want to go places and I want to see people for people. And that way I would get the widest experience that I possibly can have. But somewhere along the lines of just having that curiosity and putting myself out in the world, hoping to get as far as I could possibly go, I I've found myself in this pattern of doing things. And it was doing things that other people felt was success. But for me, I was attaining things, but I don't feel like I was really like living in me and living in what I really wanted to do. So I remember in talking about this somewhere or another, but I got my first degree in business administration not because I felt very passionate about business. Like, yeah, I was good at it. My mind is just so that, I like to understand things. So in that way, that just made me good for business. And business is one of those things that people said that you should do, that you should go after, and that would be a good career, but it wasn't me. And so getting a degree, having businesses of my own, sure, it sounded good to say, but it didn't feel good to have. It didn't feel good to have. And then when I, you know, realized that those things weren't it, I turned to something else. And instead of doing what I felt was my creative passion, I went to something else that would be successful. And I just continued this cycle of doing, 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 doing. And then I forgot how to just be me. I forgot how to be me. And I remember after, I don't know, over a decade of doing, 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 I woke up and I was like, I don't even know who I really am inside of all of these things. And even more so, I don't believe that anybody else knows who I am either, because what I had learned in that is that my family and even friends no longer really saw me as human. They saw me as like this thing, like this almost character. You know what I mean? Nobody would check on me to make sure that I was okay. Nobody would think that ordinary things that people go through, right? Nobody would think that I was affected by that stuff. Like I could go through a breakup. Nobody will call and say, "Oh my God, I know how devastating this is for you." They're like, "Oh, he'll get over it. He always does." And it's almost like they put this superhuman characteristic on me, and I became invisible as just a human being. And even to this day, I've had to do some work around that and the role that I've played in it, because the truth of it is I allowed it to be that way. I allowed it to be that way for so long because when I was going through things, I really wouldn't want to tell anybody. And when I did say something, I minimized it like, yeah, but I got this. And so I gave people license and kind of agency to treat me how I treated myself. And it wasn't a problem for me until it was a problem, or is a problem, should I say, because it continues to be that for me. And getting to a space about 3 years ago, it came to a head about 3.5 years ago. It came to a head because I felt like I was doing the work to become me. I feel like that's a everyday thing, but when you're coming from a place where you have been, this I'm doing instead of being, there is this self-separation or self-division where you kind of just become this machine and this shell of something that is just working through. And again, for me, it was just like, I'm going to do the next successful thing. I'm going to do the next successful thing. And it wasn't until 2015 that I was like, wait a minute, I'm doing something wrong here and I need to do something different. And 2015 was the first time that I was like, what the hell am I doing? And why am I still doing it knowing that this isn't what I want to do? I believe one of the hardest things was trying to wrap my head around, like, not I don't wanna say that I was pleasing people, but not worried about what people would say when I made the change, right? And it wasn't worried as in, like, judgment. I think the more impending concern for me was people trying to talk me out of the change because they were fearful, which that would irritate me or cause me some type of angst. And so when I decided to make, a change, I really didn't say anything at first. I really was just like, "You know what? I'm just gonna do it, and then that way I don't have to get, all of these negative opinions and perceptions from the people that are supposed to support me," because to other people, sometimes when you're doing things that they perceive as good or great, they're like, "Well, why would you wanna do something different?" And they can give you 100 ways, maybe even a million ways why you should just keep doing what you're doing. But deep down inside, you know that you want to do something different. And I think for a long time, I let those thoughts and those perceptions of others kind of keep me in the safe zone, but was it really safe? Was it really safe? Because what did it do for me? What did it do for me except for keep me in this kind of emotionally compartmentalized world where I only showed people this person that was achieving. I didn't want to talk about it because I didn't want to hear what people had to say. And there is a part of me also that just liked popping up and being successful at something. It was just something about it. And it wasn't necessarily ego driven, but it was just great to just not hear the minutia of whatever people were going to say. And it felt great to just show up and be like, yeah, I did a thing, and people were like, "Well, wait a minute, you did another thing and another thing." And so that just became my pattern for years, 4 years. And so I wanted to take you back to 2015 so that I could take you to 3.5 years ago, that I feel like I really had this life altering mind shift, and it came, on the heels of a breakup. It came on the heels of a breakup. I've talked about my relationship, my longest relationship, which is about 5.5 years. I talk about that kind of at length just because of a number of reasons. But more importantly, in this moment, it was the beginning of my self rediscovery journey at yet another turning point in my life where I had everything available to me that I had never had before. And I had the most on hand cash. I had, money for investments. And, I didn't want for really anything at that point in my life. I did not want for anything. So I thought. So I thought. Well, let me say this. I didn't know that I needed to want anything. And I know that sounds crazy to say, but it felt like in the moment, like I've got this lovely person that I'm with, and we've been together, and I feel loved. I feel safe in all the ways I can be safe with this person. And I have this job, and it is demanding, but I like demanding, and it's paying me. And I'm in this new place and I'm doing this new thing. So it just felt like I was living in the beginning until I had time. This job also gave me time to be on my own schedule and, time to really just refocus and zoom in on certain things. And so for a while, it was hectic, but once I kind of settled down into it, I had so much time to look around and I was looking at my relationship and I felt like, okay, like I should be doing something. Like we should be doing something. Like what should we do? And so I began pushing my partner at the time, and I pushed very, very hard. And it's something that I regret. Like, I know we hate to say that we regret things, but I kind of regret that I kept pushing him so hard the last few years of our relationship. And even though my intention was, good, and I wanted it to do it for love and I wanted to build him too, what I didn't realize is that he has always lived in his being. He always lived in his being. And there was something about him just being that I really, really loved and admired. It is one of the qualities that drew me to him. But he was just being, flaws and all, whatever he had going on, he was just being. And he was in a state of bliss, most of the time. And I don't want to say he was content, but he was fine with whatever phase that he was in at the time. And it's something that I really, really admired about his energy and his spirit. However, I thought that I was just being too until I had that time to sit and look around. And then I said, well, okay, he's not being receptive now. Let me look at me. And then I looked at myself and I was like, so how are you just being? And that just remained a question mark. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to just be. I've just been doing, 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 doing. And my nervous system has definitely got to be shot because when I'm not doing something, I feel like I need to be doing something. And so I kind of lived in that knowing that something was off with that, but I couldn't quite figure out what to do about it. I was like, what do I do about it? Like, where do I begin with sifting through this madness? Because why is this still a journey that I'm having in my 30s? That was my thought. I was like, why am I still having this thought in my 30s? Like, I felt like I already dealt with this. I went through the identity thing and being authentic. That was in 2017 or 2018 when I was like, I am being my authentic self. I'm showing up in the world as my authentic self. And I did. I presented as myself and it felt amazing. But I still just kept doing. I still just kept doing. And so the hard thing in this is when you sit with it and you're just trying to figure out like what to do next, the question that I ended up asking myself is like, what is it that you are missing at this point? Not money, not material things, not looking for necessarily the answer in other people, but what is it that you are missing? Like what are you missing? And when I sat with that and I was just like, what am I feeling? Like that was the next I was like, what am I feeling? And then I was like, I am missing the way that I feel. I don't know how I feel about these things. I know that I should feel something about this, but I don't know what to feel. Now, people would tell me that I should be grateful for where I was in life and be grateful that I have all the things and that I have arrived and that I have accomplished. And so people tell me I should feel grateful, but I was like, but what do I feel? Do I feel accomplished? I know this is an accomplishment, but does it feel like my accomplishment? And that was a question mark for me. And the more I kept going down that rabbit hole of what I feel or what I thought I should feel versus what I was told to feel, the question just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I was like, I don't even know where to start to unravel this stuff. And I believe that this is part of the reason why I ended up going through depression a couple of times because I just could not figure out where to start with that. And so something told me you might need to go back to the beginning and figure out why you've done the things that you've done. And so that started me to looking at my timeline. And so as I looked at my timeline, I see all of these things that people would consider great or good. And I just have a very mediocre feeling like, yeah, that's nice. And what I figured out is that none of it gave me fulfillment. Like there was no fulfillment in any of it. Did it feel a need? Yes. It filled needs, necessities, absolutely. But I did not feel like me. And my partner realized that I did not feel like me. And I remember this conversation and I've referenced it before, but I remember when he said to me one day, he was like, if Michael, if you're not happy, you need to do something that makes you happy. And I'm going to be here to support you in whatever you do. You know, I will figure it out. And I looked at him and I knew that he meant it. I absolutely knew that he meant it. He was the most supportive person and I really do feel like he would have given me the world. And if I had have told him, well, and I did tell him a couple of times that I just need some time not to work. I was like, I really feel like I need some time not to work, but it's not the first time I had said that to him. So let me touch on that a little bit because in real time, I'm having this revelation. After I got this job making this money, I've moved us to Maryland. And, I'm like, okay, this is hard. This is hard. And then I get it. And I'm like, okay, I got it. And he still notices that I'm not happy. Now, this is a person who has only wanted to be my biggest cheerleader, my biggest partner, my biggest co-chair. Um, so this person, when he said to me, like, Michael, I just feel like you're not happy. Like, what do you think will make you happy? I remember telling him that I would like to take some time from working. I was like, I just need to take some time off of working. I was like, I don't know, maybe 3 months. And 3 months just is something that was in my head. And I told him this before we moved to Maryland. I actually told him this during the pandemic when I was furloughed. I was furloughed for about a month, maybe a month and a half. And I remember telling him, like, I just feel like I need some time off. Now, this was prior to being furloughed, but when that month and a half happened, I thought that that would be the reprieve that I needed to get myself together. And I remember, he would check in with me during that time that I was off, and he'd be like, "How do you feel about being off?" And I was like, well, I don't know how I feel quite yet. I don't feel like it's been enough time, and I don't feel like I've decompressed from just working my whole life. And so he was like, okay, well, I just want to make sure, I just want to check in and make sure, that your mental is in the right space. And, I think you should do what you need to do. So this was the first time that we had that conversation. And so it ended up being about a month and a half. And I thought I would be out longer. So I thought it would be what I needed. But they called me back because they considered me essential. I was one of the very few people that had the qualifications that I had, and they were like, "Yeah, we just," and I'm thinking like there were 20 or so other people you guys could have called back, but you called me back and I did what I always done. I said, "You know what? Absolutely, I'm on my way." And I started doing again. And so, fast forward, like I said, that was during the pandemic, the first time I had that conversation. So we're talking like 2019, 2020, and then we make this move. And so this conversation is probably 2022, I would say. The second conversation that happens with us after the move is 2022. And so he says to me about being happy, and I say that I was like, I just maybe I do really need that time off. And he was like, yeah, we talked about this before. And, I mean, you just started this job and we just moved. He was like, but, whatever, I'll try to figure it out. And I was like, yeah, no, it wouldn't be right for me to do that like at this particular point. And I was like, no, 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 no. Like it would be foolish for me to take 3 months off or even 6 months off, which is what, I thought later on. I was like, okay. But he didn't just leave it there. At some point, he said to me, "Michael, you're not the same person that I met. You're not the same person that I met, and I really do want you to find something that makes you happy. I have not seen you smile in a long time like you used to." And he said to me very specifically, he said, you used to love doing your show. Why don't you start doing that again? He said, I believe that that show really made you happy. Now, the show that he's referencing is I did a weekly live situation, kind of like the podcast that I'm doing right now, but it was live and it was interactive with people. And every Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays, I would do this live show, and it was wonderful. Energy, music, talking, a drink. But it was so much fun, and that's how he and I met. He was watching and the one thing led to another, and then we were together. And so it stuck with me for months. And then I was like, maybe I should see if there really is a world for me to do that. Like maybe there's a world for me to do that. But there was something in me that stopped me because I was like, this isn't going to make me successful. Like, this isn't going to be successful. Now, I know people get online and they make all kinds of money doing it, but I had been online before for a few years and it never garnered me any money, not any real way. So I was like, yeah, but I don't think that that's my thing. I think that's like a once in a, I don't know, 100,000 or million people that hit it big on the internet. So I was like, I don't know. So I didn't do it right away. I didn't do it right away. But there was something about it that just kept gnawing at me, like gnawing at me. And it was his voice like, you were happy, like you were happy doing that. And so on a random weekend, I pulled out my camera and I don't know if I had ordered new microphones or what, or if I already had them, but put my microphones on and I was just like, okay, like let me just start recording. Now I couldn't go live at this point. I had got on TikTok. I couldn't go live, but I was like, let me put my camera on. And I got 10 minutes. I think it was 10 minutes. I said, I got 10 minutes to talk about whatever I want to talk about. And so I recorded it, and as I got close to my 10 minutes, I would, hit the stop button, and then I'd upload it. Well, people seem to take a liking to it like right away. Just not like, you know, thousands of views, but a couple hundred views on a brand new platform for me with no followers. I'm like, okay, so there may be a market for me in there. And so I would do those little 10-minute segments and then I would pull some of my older clips from Facebook and YouTube. And I was like, okay, let me just put a couple of these in there and see how people react to it. And so people were reacting to it. And I was like, oh wow, there's a need for my voice and there's a need for my point of view out there still. Because in my mind, I was like, who wants to even hear from me anymore? Nobody wants to hear from me. Like, this is, a different generation of people who are, going to do the thing. And I don't want to be a person in the way of that. But what I will say is like being, being me was so cathartic. Like, I couldn't wait to throw on whatever I wanted to wear, and I couldn't wait to sit in my blue chair and hit that button, and for 10 minutes, I was just being me, and it felt really, really good, but there's that thing, and this is why this lesson is so hard for me. There's that thing in my mind that kept saying, "You're spending time on this, but you're not making money. This is not success. This is not what success is. This isn't it. You're what are you gonna get from this?" And so I stopped doing it. I stopped doing it, and I was like, "Yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna focus on the thing that is sure and the thing that is making me money, and that's what I'm gonna do. That's what I'm gonna do." And so I go to work, I do the things, and I go and get another degree, and I'm planning, thinking I may get another one. So I'm just thinking about more stuff to do, and throughout this process of living or being in this life, I don't know. Um, I just realized, like, there's just I don't know how to fix the emptiness. I was like, I don't know how to fix the emptiness, but I kept coming back to feeling. What are you feeling? What are you feeling? What are you feeling? And so, like I said, the start of it, when I go back to the start of it, this happened long before. This happened long before. And it was born from me trying to get away from poverty. And in doing so, I think I developed some form of a scarcity mindset that if I stopped doing, and if I stopped doing the successful things, I'm air quoting right now because it's what other people say is successful. But if I stop doing the successful things, then guess what? I go back to that poverty. I go back to having nothing. And that to me has been a real fear. And so I think this is the first time that I'm saying that I have a fear, have that fear out loud, or even that I defined it as a fear. This is the first time, ladies, gentlemen, and they, them, I am saying that I have a fear in this moment of going back to poverty. And that's really what it is. And so I know this episode has been kind of all over the place, but I think it just really speaks to what the situation really is. And I think how it materializes for us. I think it pulls us in every which way because it challenges what we've been taught. It challenges what we've been told to be, and then what we've tried to be on our own, and the doing and the doing and the doing. And then how do you undo all of this, right? How do you undo it? But I think this really just speaks to how that materializes. And that's what makes it so hard, is that there's no one place to pinpoint how this became so big. I mean, yeah, we can talk about the catalyst being poverty. We can talk about the fact that, I didn't bring people into my world. We can talk about the people that didn't, put in effort to be in my world. We could talk about all of those things, but at the end of the day, right, all of it has added in some way, shape, or form to, this dissension into the unknown. But what I want to say about it is once I got to a place where I was like, I'm tired of doing. That was the thing because I the questions kept getting bigger and bigger. But what happened was, so back to this feeling thing, I got tired of doing. I got tired of doing. My body got tired of doing. And so it made it so much harder to go to work every day and do the things that I was told I was supposed to do, And I was like, okay, okay. And I was like, I was back at a place again where I was like, am I showing up as me? every day? Am I still showing up as me every day? And I was like, I think I am. I think I am. But then I realized I was showing up as a version of me and not the whole thing. Because although it looked like me and what I wanted me to look like for the most part, I was about 100 or so pounds heavier than I had ever been at the time. So that's something in itself, right? But the imagery that I wanted to put out, I was like, absolutely, with what I had, I was like, sure, this is still me. But internally, but internally, I was like, well, what does that look like? Now I had done the outer shell. I had done the outer shell, but I was like, okay, internally, what does that look like? What does being me internally look like? And there was somewhere that I switched and I said to myself, if you don't want to do something, even in this professional space, you say you don't want to do it. And if there is something that you do want to do, then you say that. Now, I know you're probably like, well, Michael, you're still saying doing. The difference is what I want, right? Do I want to do that? Do I not want to do that? That emanates from the inside out and not the outside in. So it is a state of being. It is a state of being, then doing, instead of just doing. And so that was the catalyst to me kind of awakening that inner me and being like, okay, like, who are you? Who do you, as Iyanla would say, who do you be? Who do you be? And so I just started with that. And then that started feeling good. It started feeling good. It started feeling like ownership. It started feeling like, I was gaining some power to be like, yeah, no, that project is not for me. Or, yes, I'd rather do that project instead. No, I'm not going to go there. No, I'm not going to stay there. I will absolutely do that. I will spend, 8 hours there. But it started with that. It really started with that. And I started feeling like me. I started feeling freer. I started feeling lighter. And so I remember at the point where I said, you know what? I do like what I'm putting on this outer, but I don't like the body. This is not my body. This is a body that I have allowed to just that I have just allowed to be here because I mean, whatever, depression, being unhappy, whatever the case may be, right? Nobody complained about it. Everybody said, "You look good with weight on you." And I'm sitting here like looking like a gopher with two stuffed cheeks, about the face. And I was like, this is not me. This is not me. But then I had to look at the other things too. And I said, and I remember looking at my nightstand and I saw like an anxiety medication. I saw two depression medications, a blood pressure medication. And I looked at it. And at the point where I was going to ask my doctor for something else, right? I think to help me sleep, I said, you know what? That's not me either. I was like, that's not me. And so that started me on this mind, body, and spirit journey where I was like, I need to do just like a full cleansing and realignment of who I am because I have allowed so many external factors to get in and muddy my identity and stop me from feeling. And also that stopped me from being creative. I'm a creative at heart. And I was like, this is stopping my creativity. This is stifling my growth. And so the only way that I could see myself getting through this fog or whatever it is called was I was like, I just have to take a break from all of it. I have to take a break from all of this. And so I just started the job, maybe what I had been there for ugh, just about a year at this point, and it just came to me. It was like, tell them you need to take a leave. Something I have never done anywhere that I have ever worked. Never asked for a leave. I got into a place where I took my vacation. I was very, very firm on that because I was like, I have to have these moments. Now, what I did on those vacations is another episode, but I was like, tell them you need to leave. And I remember having the idea, and I remember talking to my partner about the idea, and he was like, "You're gonna take a leave?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Okay." He's like, "Okay." The amazement that I have for him to just be, right? He's like, "Okay." It's nothing for him. Like it was like I wish that whatever that was in him, that he's just like, "Okay." I wish that I had that because he would just if he felt something like that's what he'd do and he'd be like, "Okay," and he'd be fine with it. And so when I said it, he was like, "Okay, cool. All right." He's like, "I got you. If you need me, let me know. I'll see if I can take some time off or, whatever. I got you." And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much, babe. Always supportive." Um, but I will say that leading up to it, I was just like, "Oh, we don't do this." Like all the things that I've been taught. See, I'm going back to that. I was like, because it there's no way to just stop the programming, right? It just pops up when it pops up. And so part of me was like, "No, we don't do a leave, Michael. Like we weren't taught to take leaves." And I was like, that is the problem. After going through this mental health journey, I said, "But this is the problem." And you know what? I'm gonna go in here and if they fire me for asking for a leave, they just fire me. I think that was where I had to go with it. I think I had to go to what is the worst that can happen to me if I tell these people that I need a leave? Like what is the worst thing that can happen? They can tell me no or they can fire me or I quit, right? Like those were the only things that would happen. The world isn't going to stop, right? I mean, maybe my bills or whatever, I don't know how that I was going to work through that. I didn't really care about that at the moment. I just was like, it's now or never. It's now or never. And I text my boss and I said, I need to talk to you. She said, okay. She sent me, time she was available. And I said, hey, I need to take a couple weeks off. I just need to handle some personal things with me. And I need the time off. And she said, "Okay, yeah, whatever you need. You like, do you feel like you know what time? Do you feel like you know what you need? You need like 2 months, or?" And I was like, "No," because I think she immediately said 2 months, and I was like, "No, I don't think 2 months." I was like, "I don't know." I said, I just start with a month for now." I was like, and then I'll just kind of see where I'm at. But I said, I really have some things to do, so. She says, no, no, no worries. Go ahead and put it in the portal and things like that. She's like, do you have a date when you want to start your leave? And this was in May, and I said, "Well, I want to finish out the month and get my team where they need to go." And she said, "Okay, no worries. Yeah, go ahead and send it. I'll make sure it gets approved. Whatever you need, you just let me know, right?" And so it was just that simple. It was just that simple. And I probably leading up to asking had went through a whole montage of like, don't do it. You were taught not to do this, but do it anyway because that's what these things are there for. I went through this whole like list of things that really didn't matter at the end of the day because I really needed to take care of me. And so, leading up to that leave, I was setting my teams up and getting them ready and I was like, "You guys," and they are like, "Are you coming back?" And I was like, "I fully intend to come back." Now, and aside from my situation is that usually when people go on leaves with this company, they typically don't come back. Like they ride the leave out to get paid. That wasn't my zhuzh at all. But so I took that leave and I was like, okay, this is for me to get my mind, body, and spirit into alignment because I am just off. I am just off and I got to kick all of these meds cuz we're not doing that. Those things are not me. This was in 2023, June of 2023. And so as I started that period of realignment, just from the inside, I just started moving and being from the inside out instead of the outside in. And everything from the breakup happening, everything from, you know, the cloud, the fog in my head, because when you're on medication for depression and things like that, it does do something to you. And I had felt like I wasn't my creative, happy, energetic stuff. I felt like I hadn't been myself in a while since I started them, and it had been a few years. And so I just felt not immediately freer. The headaches were terrible coming off of that stuff at the beginning, but once I got there, I felt free. I just was like, I am freer. Like, I am much freer. I felt my energy coming back. I felt like I wanted to be creative. Like, truly, like, I was like, it was kind of like I was kickstarting an old Buick or something, or an old vehicle, that old truck that you turn the ignition a couple of times or whatever, and it doesn't quite turn over the first few times, right? But you can tell that it wants to start. Like, that's how I feel like my creativity was slowly coming back. And so I went through the leave, and I was like, okay, I feel better physically now. I've gotten all that out of my system. um, Unfortunately, the breakup happened during that period, so that was a little something, but I didn't feel really empty afterwards. I felt sad. I feel like I was mourning the loss of this person that I had been with, because it's my first time that I had been with somebody this long and that I had loved so much, and that loved me that much. So I want to be very clear about that too. I did mourn the loss for about a month or two, but that didn't feel like it left a hole in my heart or affected, the ability for me to be me. I was like, I could still go out in the world and be me. What I didn't bank on was that this being me, this being me now at 30 something years old, mid 30s, I didn't realize that that person would no longer resonate with a lot of other people. And so that was the other hard part about this lesson, is that when you are being yourself and you are being the you that you are meant to be, that doesn't work with other people naturally. It just does not. So obviously the boyfriend, we were no longer an item, and I was like, okay. And I had prayed my solemn prayer for the Lord to remove anything and anyone out of my way that is not meant for me, and allow me to see the spaces I'm meant to walk into, and that I walk through them freely. That was my prayer, with a little bit more, but that was my prayer. And then, next thing I know, a couple of days later, me and him break up. I find out something about him, and then I started to I started to enlist for the first time the emotional support of friends and family. So, like I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, I had allowed people to just kind of put me in this character position where I was like a superhuman, and none of the things that, would affect normal people would affect me. However, this time I said, you know what? I am going to be the person that brings people in, because I want people to see me now. I want people to see me for me, not that character anymore. I want people to see me for me. And so when I reached out to friends, very few friends were very sympathetic or even empathetic to what I was going through. I got like the polite sympathies and stuff like that, but nobody really, like, no one really kind of came in and was like, let me help, or let me, be there for you. No one really did that. So that was a thing. And then when it wasn't the friends or the people that I thought were friends, when they didn't show up for me emotionally and to give me the support, I did my family next. And I said, okay, this is an opportunity for me to give my family the same, the same latitude, to just be like, hey, I know you guys haven't, seen me this way before, but I want to invite you guys in, that, this is where I am, and this is, how I'm feeling. And that wasn't even received in a way where people were like, "Oh my god, let me figure out how to support you. Let me show up for you emotionally, physically." I'm like, "Oh my goodness." I was in a city where no one offered, no one, even when I said something, no one was like, "Hey, come. I'm coming. I'm going to come and I'm going to support you." Nobody. And I remember reaching out to various people like, "Hey, like, if I fly you in, can you come? I just need somebody. I just, whatever." And a friend did answer and did come, but when that friend came, they made it about them experiencing the town and stuff like that. They weren't there to support me. They wanted to have an experience. This was like a field trip. And so that didn't feel good to me. Um, but my family, like nobody was like, yeah, I'll come. Like I understand where you're at. Nobody said they'll come. And so then I started like, okay, if they can't come to me, I'm gonna go to them. And so then I started going to them and then realizing that nobody seemed to care, or at least care in the way that I needed to be cared for. And that kind of left me in a place where I was like, I'm gonna have to leave. I'm gonna have to leave some of these people, and this is friends and family. I was like, I'm gonna have to leave these people, and it's not because they're bad people. And it's not because they don't know how to show up for me. It's because they didn't try. It's because they didn't try. Right? I understand that I have lived this life and I've allowed you to see me as a superhero. But in this moment, I had committed to asking for what I needed, like from them, like letting them know this is what I need and this is where I am. And, if you show up, great. I would love for you to show up. I really wanted everybody to show up, but they did not. And these are people that I had always shown up for. So to add insult to injury, these are people that I continued showing up for throughout the majority of whatever our relationship was. And so that was a even worse feeling that these same people in my time of need just acted as if, oh, he's fine, he'll get over it. And so I was like, I'm just going to break away from these people and allow those relationships to die off. And whatever comes from it next is whatever comes from it next. And so back to these last 3 years, right? Because that journey has been the last 3.5 years almost, right? It has been the most soul tugging thing that I've ever done. And I always say like at every facet of your life, you do learn new things about yourself and the self journey continues, but there's always this period of time where it just gets really, really intense. And as I sit here in this moment, I can say to you that if I were to die today, it would probably be weeks before someone found me in my home. And I know that is not great to hear, but it was a realization that I had sitting on my couch the other night. I said, this is crazy. My phone has not rang in days. I haven't got a text in days. And I said, if I were to die, people are so used to not checking in on me that it would be weeks, maybe even months before someone would know that something was wrong. And that was a very hard pill for me to swallow because it left me, and it still has me in this place of what do I do? Like, what do I do about that? What do I do about that? And on one hand, my first thought was like, well, maybe try with these family members again. Maybe try with these family members again. Maybe, this time they'll get it. And I'm like, no, if they wanted to, they would, right? If they wanted to, they would. Like you would think after the last few years that somebody would say, he's had a lot of change in his life. But I moved across I moved across the country again to Texas. And when I let people know that that was happening, none of these people showed up to support or even offered to support. And I remember sending a text message to my family and saying like, "Hey, like if I fly one of you here, would you guys be willing to drive with me because I didn't want to leave my plants and the every moving company is like, we can't move your plants. And so I was like, I'm not leaving my plants. My plants are my babies. And so I reached out to my family in the family chat and I was like, hey, if I fly you guys here, like, will one of you guys come? Now, my sister texted me maybe a couple of days after and was like, "Oh, can you give me the days again?" And I felt some type of way about that because I put the days in there and I did it well in advance because I was like, people can take off work if they need to or whatever it may be. I made sure to put that in there. But none of my family offered to come. I mean, or really responded in a real meaningful way that they wanted to come. And so you would think that, and I stopped talking to them for a few months because of that. And so you would think that when we finally did reconnect, that somebody would have said, like, "How are you? Like, how can I show up for you?" They did not, and have not up until this point. And I don't say that to be mean or incite anything other than just give you the information. But, I had one friend that was here already that was willing to help to a degree, right? That person was willing to help to a degree, but he and I are no longer friends anymore. Imagine that. Um, Imagine that, right? The last remaining friend, he and I disconnected from our friendship about a month ago at this point. Well, at the point of me recording this. And he made that decision, and I was just okay with letting it happen because, the reasons were trivial. And I just felt like if that was the reason that he wanted to move on, that, that was fine with me. But if I'm honest with myself, I think I felt like there was a distance in between, or there was something there. And I think I kind of side eyed our interactions. We hadn't been around each other consistently for years until I moved back here. But I think I kind of side eyed some of our interactions together. So when it happened, and it was for the reason I said, this was just meant to be what it was meant to be. And so I had already felt isolated um, for the other things that I have mentioned over the last 3 years. Um, and then that, which I'm like, okay, it is what it is. But like I said, the other day I had the revelation that if I were to die, nobody would know. And that was off-putting for me. And so what do I do about that, right? I don't know 100% what to do about that. I think that going into whatever relationships, I use relationships broadly, but whatever relationships that I pour into going forward, they're going to have to be much different. They're going to have to be much different, and they're going to have to be relationships where I do, where I feel that they give me the same thing that I give everybody else, and what I seek to give everyone else. And that is to be seen, to be heard, and to feel understood. I That is my goal with this podcast. It is my goal any room that I walk into and I advise people on whatever I'm advising them on. It is my goal to make someone else feel more seen, more heard, and more understood. And in doing so, hopefully less alone in what they're going through. But I know that I don't 100% know, right, what the fix and the solve is, but I do know that going into whatever I go into, that has to be a requirement. No longer can I give people the option of not checking in. It has to be who you are. It has to be who you are. It has to be what you want to give and receive in the situation too. I believe in reciprocity and synergy, but it has to be that. It has to be that. And this all started, I know that's a lot of information, right? But this all started from a realization of doing that caused the disconnect. instead of the state of being. And so my hope is that listening to me unpack the doing, and getting into the being, my hope is that you analyze your timeline like I did, realize what touch points, what peaks and what valleys that you've had that maybe have caused some of the same emotional dissension and disconnection with friends, families, fans, or other loved ones or admirers. But hopefully, you dig into those things and figure out how to course correct before you get too far down the line. Because for me, like I said before, um, listening to Tariq Ali talk about his breakthrough and wanting to hit rock bottom, right? Wanting to kind of have that fresh start, wanting to get back to that place of feeling and being really made me think about my own life and the hard lesson that I am still learning about it, but life lesson that was essential nonetheless. I'm glad that at nearly 40, I am awakened to new things all the time. And that this self journey of the last 3.5, almost 3.5 years, I hate that it has been so long. I hate that it took 3.5 years to go through this journey, but it is necessary, and it is unfolding and unraveling and rebuilding and revamping in the time that it should. And I'm learning every single day new things about how I want to be loved, how I want to love, how to care for people, and how to be cared for by people, and just a multitude of feelings that I didn't really express before, and that I really didn't allow people to share with me in a real meaningful way. And I think in moving forward in my next chapter, now knowing that being is so important, and I'm keeping that top of mind, but moving forward, that my relationships with people will be much better and built on a much better foundation. And even more so as I move in career spaces, it's about finding the thing that allows me to be while doing whatever it is that I'm doing. And so, again, my hope is that, we all are able to examine ourselves, take whatever time that we need, whatever disconnections that we need. My hope is that we all do that work and just come out being and feeling better. I thank you all so much for the time. This has been the Michael Experience podcast. I appreciate you all so much, and I really hope the best for us all. And I will see you all on the next episode. Peace and love, y'all. Bye.